welcome to a special episode of عنان podcast, shot here live at the Miss Global Forum 2024. I'm super excited to be sharing this session with a very special guest, ستيفن Bارتلت. ستيفن is an entrepreneur, author, and podcast host, best known as the co-founder of Social Chain, a global social media marketing agency he started at just 22. He's also very well known for his podcast, The Diary of a CEO. Welcome, ستيفن.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
How does it feel being on the other side of the...
Yeah, it's rare, to be honest. But I want to do more of this, you know. I want to do more other people's podcasts and shows because, I don't know, it feels a little bit selfish always interviewing people for mine and not ever kind of giving it back. But it's just time at the moment in this season of my life. So it's nice to be here with you.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here with us. So I'd like us to peel back the layers of who you are, bring you a little bit closer to the audience if you're comfortable with that. So if you could take a moment to think about and tell us about first memories and possibly 3 defining moments of your life.
Yeah, I think so. The things that characterized who I am were, first and foremost, being born in Africa, being born in Botswana as a young, I think I was 2 or 3 years old when we left Botswana, but my mother was Nigerian and my dad was English. We came to the UK when I was very, very little. And we were just a bit of a strange family and we were a bit isolated. I've never known my grandparents or my cousins. They all live in the UK, but we were just a little bit isolated because there was a couple of disagreements with my mother and father and other parts of my family. And so we moved to Devon, which is in the southwest of England, and we were just a bit of a strange family in a pretty much middle class, all-white area.
I've been to Devon and Dorset.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have a great butter and jam as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, there's pasties and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And cheese, maybe.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was really, really pertinent because you learn the value of everything in life by the context in which you see it. So, you know, when you look at a menu and you're trying to make a decision which steak to buy,
right,
you're actually looking at the context of the other steaks that are on sale. And so if there's a really expensive steak in the studies, you'll think that the most expensive one is too flashy.
Yeah.
You'll think the cheapest steak is probably bad, and people will go for the middle one.
Right.
Now, in the context in which I saw myself, I was the crap steak because we were poor relative to the people we lived around, but we lived in a middle class area because when we arrived, we had a little bit of money, and then I was black. So all of that shame creates this sort of cauldron of insecurity, and that makes that's energy.
Right.
And that energy can be used for a lot of things. It can be self-destructive or it can be productive. Like all of these traumas and the things that happen in our lives, you know, it almost goes back to like Einstein's theory of relativity and what physicists have found about energy. You can't be destroyed. It just moves somewhere.
Right.
So that energy that I had, the shame and the insecurity, was moved into trying to fix the thing that was causing me the shame and insecurity, which was money and fitting in. So that became much of my focus as a young man. And fortunately, my parents weren't around when I was about 10, 11 years old. They just were so busy with work that they weren't there when I woke up and weren't there when I came home. So I had a lot of space to try things. And in trying things, I failed a lot. I made mistakes, but I learned. And that learning is evidence, and that evidence is confidence.
What sorts of things are we talking about in terms of you trying them?
Very simple. Young man, wanted the same shoes that all my rich white friends had, the Rockports or the Fred Perrys. I wanted to go on the ski trip that they were all going on. And like, imagine the feeling of being the only kid that couldn't have the thing, that like would lie on his birthday about the things, the presents you got because we didn't get things, or would have to make up things for Christmas because we didn't get anything on Christmas. That's like a constant feeling of shame. And I'm already like chemically relaxing my hair to make it straight and to try and fit in. All of that like shame resulted in me finding ways to make the money, which meant I'd start a school trip to Thorpe Park.
Nice.
And I'd organise the consent forms and I'd get beanies made and printed with different colours on them, and I'd hand out the consent forms, I'd collect the money, I'd call Nando's and book the tables, and I'd book the group bookings at Thorpe Park. Or it meant that I did like a vending machine deal for my school where my school were going to buy vending machines and I thought I could get them for free.
This is at 10, 11?
No, I'm in sixth form by this point. I'm about 16 years old.
Okay.
Before that, I was doing under 18 events in the Southwest. So I would, back then in the day, you could make a Facebook event and it would go viral. So I was basically running this like under 18s nightclub franchise where I'd go to nightclubs, find a night when they were not busy, hire the venue, sell the tickets, and then just selling things. So my mum one day one summer, I think she went to Nigeria and got loads of like cigarettes from Nigeria, and she came into the house and put them in one of the back rooms in the house, and then she just like left them forever. And she was so busy with running her corner shop that, you know, you're 14, 15 years old, you're trying to make money. You think, I'll just take one pack and I'll sell one pack. And then one pack becomes two packs.
One cigarette, sell a cigarette at a time.
Yeah. And so just things like that, but all of these things were teaching me. They were teaching me fundamental skills. They were teaching me sales skills. They were teaching me what money was. And the most important thing it taught me, which I would just try and force into my child's psyche, is this idea that you can have an idea, whether it was a school trip or an event or a party or whatever it was, you could have an idea and then you yourself could make it happen.
Bring it to life.
And that's like a really important like science experiment that like you need to run in your life, because once you have that, you can never unsee that, you can never unbelieve that. So still I knew at 16, 17 years old that I could have an idea and then bend the world with enough force, with enough perseverance, enough will, enough like dedication, could bend the world in the direction that I needed it to be bent. And so incredible. I remember saying at 16, 17, 18 years old that if you told me to go to the moon next week, my default reaction to that is like, it's possible. And I just need to figure out who to send an email to, who's going to the moon next week, and persuade them to let me on.
Nice.
And that's a bias towards belief.
Where do you think that came from, though?
I just think I think sometimes we can prop people up too much. And when you prop someone up, they don't learn the lessons they need to learn. And it's funny, this is a bit of a tangent, but some of my best friends in life, I remember one of my best friends, he always talks about this online. He was 30 years old and he was living at my house and he didn't have a job. He was making nightclub flyers for 50 quid a pop. And because he's my friend and I loved him, I let him live in my house. At this time, I've got this big house, 7-bedroom house, in the north of Manchester, tennis court at the bottom. Well, he was living in my house. And eventually, for whatever reason, I said to him, bro, you've got to leave. You've got to leave now. You've got to go for yourself. He moved back home to his childhood home and he went through it himself. He went through the struggle himself, figuring out the life himself, and now he's a multi-millionaire living in Dubai.
That's incredible.
And that only took him like 3 or 4 years, but I was propping him up. And we do the same sometimes with children.
Yeah.
Through love, we prop people up and we rob them of the lessons that they need to learn. Yeah. And my parents, they weren't around, so they didn't prop me up, and I got to learn the lessons.
It's very incredible that you say this, because it could be a double-edged sword. Maybe in some cases people could go down wrong paths if there's no one looking after them throughout the day, if they're left to their own devices. I just find it super powerful that you, at the age of 10, where your parents are working round the clock, that you decided to take this energy and propel it towards something more impactful for you and your future.
I think the framing of that makes me sound like it was super intentional and like I was like, extremely motivated. But I think the reality is probably quite different. I think the reality was I was really insecure and I really wanted to fit in and I really wanted a girlfriend. And the thing that was making me insecure, the thing that was invalidating me was money and, the clothes and stuff like that. And this is important because I was saying on stage earlier on that in life, it's hard to know the difference between being driven and dragged. And when we do interviews and stuff, we want to tell the world, project to the world that we're like incredibly motivated and we're driven and it was intentional. And we paint ourselves as the hero in our own story. But actually, a lot of the time, as someone that's interviewed some of the world's most exceptional entrepreneurs and athletes, someone like Israel Adesanya, who told me the story of how he became, I think he's like the middleweight champion of the world a couple of years ago. How did he become the middleweight champion of the world? A kid from Africa. Yeah. Well, you dig into his story. He flew to New Zealand. They moved to New Zealand. And they just beat him up all the time. They beat him up so often on the playground because he was black that he would at lunchtime, he would go out and around the edge of the school just to make sure he wasn't beaten up. So if you say to Israel Adesanya, oh my God, how did you become the greatest of all time? You've got to shine a light on it's what I said earlier, the trauma that created an energy. Mm-hmm. And that energy, it doesn't get destroyed, it moves somewhere. It could move into addiction. It could move into some other form of behavior, but it moved into what turned out to be a productive behavior. The critical thing is at some point you need to realize what's driving you and you need to take back control of the steering wheel because it might just take you somewhere you don't want to go. Yeah. For example, me, if I carried on being driven in that way, really unconsciously, imagine that, what's the probability that I'm going to have a good relationship and be a good father? Yeah. 0.
Absolutely.
So you have to gain awareness, adjust your priorities, and have a new North Star, a new sort of guiding principle, a new motivation.
So going back to your parents for a minute, if I recall correctly, I think there was an interview with you where you said that when you had decided to quit university, was it?
Yeah.
That your mom was unhappy with that.
To say the least. My mom was, I wish she was unhappy. She was very disappointed. And the context is super important, because I think so often in life when someone behaves in a strange way, we don't appreciate their perspective.
Okay.
And this is really important. I interviewed a spy about a year ago, called Andrew Bustamante, and his job was to go undercover in faraway lands and get people's secrets. And he said to me, like, if you want to motivate or manipulate someone, there's this rubric of like reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. But he says the big thing that none of us do is we don't appreciate the other person's perspective. There's perception, which is what I'm seeing here,
right,
and then there's your perspective.
Yes.
And if I can understand like, you don't know right now that I see a blue light down there.
Yeah, that's
you didn't
true.
know that,
yes,
right? Because you can't see my perspective. And if you want to understand me, if you want to get the best out of me to motivate me, you have to do the really difficult thing of seeing what I'm looking at.
Okay.
And then you want to speak to me through that perspective, not your perception, but my perspective. And he says this is the art of like getting the best out of people. And so when I think about my mother's perspective, when I was 18 and I called her and she said, if you drop out of university, I will never speak to you again, I was able to put myself in her perspective. And her perspective was, this is a woman who left school when she was 7 or 8 years old, can't read or write, didn't get an education.
Probably spent her life trying to make sure that you
spent her life struggling at every turn with every person in every business endeavor, because she can't log onto the internet, she can't write, she can't send a text message, struggle in pain. And she finally gets herself in a situation where she's got these kids and the kids are fine and they're safe, and 3 of them go off to university and they're killing it, and they went to LSE and a lawyer, whatever. Then the last one turns around and says, education, this is what she hears, education is not for me. And the reason why I say this is what she hears is because education and university are 2 separate things.
Yes.
She says, this is not for me. And so what she feels is danger.
Because it's her shame
safe.
and her insecurities and her perspective, yes.
Yeah, that's her lived experience,
yes,
was if you don't get an education, you will have struggle and pain. And her perspective was that education is safety. So was her reaction. And fortunately, at the time I knew that.
You knew that.
Yeah.
So you were able to see things from her perspective.
Exactly. And I knew that
at that time. It's not in hindsight.
Love shows up in funny ways.
Okay.
And especially with parents.
Yes.
And it's okay. Parents are often wrong. And like, how does a parent know what's right for you? It ain't their life. And if you accept these as first principles, like my parents actually don't know what's best for me. In fact, nobody knows what's best for me. I barely know.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give myself the space to try. Then I think those conversations are easier to deal with. And years later, when I was safe and my life was good, she was happy. And I was happy. And there was no need for like forgiveness. People always say, do you forgive her? I was like, no, because she loved me.
Yeah.
The decision was a decision made through love. So yeah.
I like that. That's extremely powerful in that you see things from her perspective, and you're very secure in her love for you. Mm-hmm. So it's not a matter of questioning that and then adding more to your own insecurities and so on. So that's incredibly powerful and healthy. So you, in addition to your entrepreneurship side, there's your podcast side, and you sit with some of the most prominent figures around the world. What have you found to be the common denominator amongst them, if any?
One of the interesting things is there's always a moment in their journey where they made a decision that most people wouldn't make, because it's like objectively a terrible choice. Yeah. It's like in that moment, it's like when people say, oh, you dropped out of university after one lecture. Yeah. Objectively, like terrible decision. You had no plan B, you were broke, your mother wasn't going to speak to you ever again. You're fat, your parents cut you off.
Yes.
I was stealing Chicago town pizzas to feed myself. Like objectively, you look at that moment and you go, terrible decision. Stay, do the degree, get the student loan, safety, take the money from your dad or whatever. Terrible strategic decision. But like for me, it was the critical decision.
Right.
And in the stories of, whether it's Jimmy Carr, the comedian, who was off to do, had a wonderful career ahead of him, and then makes the bizarre decision as a young man that he was going to leave it all behind and go and tell jokes in clubs for 5-6 years and get paid absolutely nothing. Or Darren Brown, the famous illusionist who sells out shows for months and months and months on end and is known around the world and has TVs and movies about him. He was off again, wonderful career ahead of him. And he decides for 10 years to go and do card tricks on restaurant tables in Bristol. So just like a ridiculous decision.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. That's not the right decision.
Yeah.
The right decision.
Yes.
But that's what makes them anomalies. That's what ultimately ends them up in a place where we want to interview them, is they made an anomalous decision that most people wouldn't make at a critical moment. And that's what they all tend to have in common. And the question is, like, why did they make the decision? Mm-hmm. And that's a multifaceted answer. And it's always different. Some of them were following their passion. Some of them were so riddled with shame and insecurity that
they needed to fill that gap. Or
the alternative was the bigger risk.
Okay.
But that's maybe the thing they all have in common. Yeah.
Okay. I find that fascinating because for me, I have a niece who's around 18. She's just getting into college, and we were having a discussion about. She's like, I'm not interested in anything. And I'm like, but you gotta kind of just have it there as a backup plan, you know? She's like, why do I need a backup plan? So I think there's always this kind of, as you said, it's a risk that you're taking that's out of the norm, but at the same time, it could lead to something. But I think for a lot of people, on the reverse side, it's what if it doesn't lead to something? What if you ended up just quitting or deciding not to pursue the standard or what the right choice is, as you said, and you end up not where you intended to be? And I don't know what's the...
How old's your niece?
My niece, she's 17, 18.
She's 17. How big is her mortgage?
None.
How many kids has she got?
That's true. There's no risk.
None. You got no kids? Got no mortgage?
Kids, no mortgage.
Anything else that she's got?
No.
Okay. So she should be taking big risks.
A phenomenal persona.
Okay, so if she tries something and fails, where is she going to be?
Back to where she is now.
Exactly where she is now. She should be taking the biggest risks in the world. If she rolls the dice and she gets a bad hand, she should be rolling that dice like crazy, and she shouldn't have a backup plan. She should be taking big, outsized risks, because failure is going to be feedback, feedback's going to be knowledge, and knowledge is going to be power. So she needs to be taking tremendous big risks. She needs no backup plan. She needs to be in full exploration mode in her life, and also she shouldn't have a plan. She shouldn't have like a 5, 10, 15-year plan. It's just going to distract her from the process of experimentation that she needs to go on to figure it out. If I said my advice to her would be, you need to just try things, and you need to quit very quickly when you realize that that's not the thing. And if there was a part of the thing that you liked the people part, you liked working with the animals, but you just hated that office.
How do you transfer that into something else?
Pay that forward into the next experiment. Okay, we're going to go work at a zoo because we love being around the animals. Okay, we don't like the hours at the zoo. We don't like having to clean up the poo, but we still like the animals, and we found out that we like doing marketing. Okay, so we're going to go work at an e-commerce pet food company doing marketing. She ain't going to figure it out. You know, when you're lost, sometimes you just got to walk. It doesn't matter which direction you walk in. You got to get moving, because
you get somewhere.
Movement creates information.
Yes.
And if she sat in her bedroom trying to figure out her life from her desk in her bedroom, she's going to get no information. So what she needs to do is move, go try some stuff quick. And relinquish the sort of belief that she needs to figure it out, because no one can figure it out.
I think that's something that a lot of youth are struggling with today. Everyone's like, I need to figure this out. And I see the way that they operate. I mean, schools, it baffles me, but you'd think the education system kind of keeps up with the way that our lives have changed as well, and I don't think that that's happening. So you have all these kids going through standardized testing, going through all these pressures to try to figure things out, and this is my conversation with youth. Usually it's like, honey, I don't know, I'm 36, I don't know, I still haven't figured it out fully, you know? You need to be agile enough, and I think a lot of that is actually causing some anxieties within them.
Of course, because the sort of implicit narrative in the institution, which no one says out loud, some people just subtly make you feel that way, is that if you don't get the grades, then you're a failure. But if you don't have a plan, you're also a failure. Yes. Now imagine if you don't have either. Imagine if you have bad grades and no plan. Then how do you not believe that you're a failure? Yeah. Like your brain is still forming, And the institution around you has told you implicitly that you're a failure.
It's defined it.
Like, how do you survive that? How do you survive such a system with your confidence? And the crazy thing about that institution is it implicitly but also explicitly gives you labels. Now, the label might be an F, or the implicit thing might be, you don't have a plan. But labels are unbelievably powerful.
Yeah.
If you study labeling theory and see how strong and how persuasive and how influential the labels that other people and ourselves give us when we're throughout any facet of our life, it's like we intuitively know that like you are just a story. Mm-hmm. You are a narrative that you've chosen to believe based on everything that's happened to you. And that story is also an instruction manual for how you'll carry yourself and behave and the decisions you'll make and the choices you'll make out there. The minute this interview ends, it's just a story that you've believed about who you are, your identity, what you stand for. And imagine, at a young age getting the story that you're an F and that everyone else is smart and that you're not. Like, how do you survive that? In studies, when they remind someone of what they call it, a stereotype threat. So if they remind a black person of their race before let's say a math test, when there's a stereotype that black people are bad at maths,
they score less.
They score way less. But importantly to say, if they don't remind you of your race before such a test, the results are the same. And so you got to think about the stories you're believing and also the way you label yourself.
So that's and with social media as well, those labels are increasing in the cancel culture and the way that people are behaving and the online bullying. So I can only imagine the kind of pressure that puts on people. And I like what you said about and I think people need young people need to stay true to their character and not be completely influenced. But it's difficult. It's
like impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible because we're designed to be in tribes. And so validation is actually survival. Like validation, like fitting in your tribe a gazillion years ago and the tribe and feeling useful to the tribe, like you were a value, was like paramount to you staying alive. Because if you were ostracized from the tribe, you were dead within a couple of, weeks or days. So it's built in us to fit in, to be valuable to the tribe, to be accepted by them. And obviously on the internet, on the open internet, there's a lot of people that are playing with that sort of prehistoric design to make you think otherwise. So if you think about TikTok now, like the rise in suicidality and anxiety amongst young girls in particular is a symptom of that, I think.
Absolutely. So do you feel like as a someone who's working within the social media domain, do you feel a sense of responsibility to kind of bring more awareness to things like this and to kind of reduce the labeling and the polarization that exists from social media and the culture that it creates? There's an online global culture that's being...
It's part of the reason why I love podcasting, because podcasting is depth and it's nuance, and I sit there for 3 hours with people, so you're really gonna understand beyond the headline. You're really going to understand what it is to be a human. You're going to understand the insecurities, the struggles, the grief, the complex things, and I think that is so relatable when you see someone for 3 hours in all their forms, that it makes you believe that all the things you're struggling with aren't evidence of your own inadequacy. They're actually evidence that you're just a human like everyone else. Whereas on Instagram, if it's just like a bikini selfie or something on a beach, and the person looks perfect, it's just going to be evidence of your inadequacy. It's just going to be, highlight reel versus perfection. So podcasting is lovely because it's so deep and it's so...
So one thing about podcasting, and I have to ask this question, is how did you start getting such prominent prominent to come and sit with you? And
just paying them loads of money. I'm joking. No,
I mean, that works, but...
No, we've never paid a guest. People ask me this all the time.
Yeah.
We've never in our history paid a guest, and it should be pretty easy to find out if I'm not telling the truth, because we've got 300-400 guests now, so
that's incredible.
You can go ask any of them if any of them were paid. But it's a slow process of building leverage. So it's funny because Dom knows what I'm about to say. When we started the podcast, we started it in the pandemic, and we vowed to only ever do it in person. So you're in a pandemic, you're only ever going to do it in person. People are scared to come. They've never heard of this podcast before. The podcast has 0 subscribers. How do you get people to come? It's probably a similar process that you're going through as a podcaster. You got to get one person. I remember we were in 4 or 5 episodes in. No one wanted to come on the podcast. So Dom was at the time booking the guests, and we've got we need, we've got an open slot tomorrow. We need someone to come on. I'm calling around my friends. I'm begging people. I remember texting my friend Dan Murray, who I think he's episode 4 or 5, and be like, mate, you run a business. Please, will you come on the podcast? And him saying yes, and me being just so grateful. That episode goes out, and then it's the same process. And slowly, and eventually you'll have some kind of breakthrough moment where someone big takes a chance on you, and then you can always use their name in the future.
Oh, that's incredible.
And then it changes.
And it builds the momentum for future.
The important thing to know is that there is no other way to where you want to get to, no matter who you are, than the route of embarrassment, difficulty, insecurity, and feeling like you're making it up as you're going along.
Yeah.
There's no other path. There's
like you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, there's not like an elevator. It's like this horrible mountain of insecurity where you're stumbling and hitting rocks, and people, your friends are laughing at you because he thinks he's a podcaster. He doesn't know what he's doing. Look at that. What did he say? He just stuttered. He stuttered. There's no other way there. And you have to go through that for 3, 5, 7 years. If you could accept that, if you can accept that you're going to embarrass yourself and your friends, and you're going to lose some friends, and it's going to be difficult, and people are going to say no in your face, you can accept that. You can do anything in life. You can.
I love that. It's like falling flat on your face and getting back up.
Who wants that? Going back to what we said earlier, when we're all innately trying to fit in and be accepted, who wants to stand out and fall flat? No one wants that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So I'm going to maybe go back to this point and possibly end with it. I feel like our friends are calling time. But you mentioned that there's a difference between education and learning. Yeah. And, we're all about, with youth, lifelong learning and how we can incorporate that and kind of make it within the DNA of youth. So how do you envision a future of lifelong learning for youth?
I think to get youth to become lifelong learners, you have to personalize the education. Now, the problem we discuss with school is it's a one-size-fits-all approach. Yeah. So what happens if 40% of the school have different types of brains where they don't learn like that? They're going to be disenfranchised from learning ever. They're going to think that they're not good at learning or something. So as early as you possibly can, if you can personalize the learning, then I think you can make kids fall in love with the process of learning. And also, we need to find a way to remove the judgment from people's performance, especially in like standardized tests. Yeah. And the wonderful thing that we have on the horizon, which might solve for all of this, is artificial intelligence.
What's your take on that?
Well, I just think it's going to be the most important thing that's going to happen in the field of education. I think the fact that an AI can get to know me, know what I'm good at, know my strengths, know how to teach me, know my exact aptitude in every single subject, and when I come back tomorrow, pick me up from there.
Right.
And if I'm sick this day, I don't have to then, because in school, if you're sick for like a week, you
missed and you need to catch up.
Yeah. Well, AI will know that I was sick and it will wait.
Yeah.
And I think but it also will reinforce me and it will encourage me, and my education and my future won't be determined by a good or bad teacher that I did or didn't have because of my socioeconomic situation. So I think AI is a real leveler as it comes to education, and I'm really happy.
Inclusivity of education.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And in the village in Botswana where I was born, have the same education as in San Francisco.
Do you go back frequently?
Not to Botswana, no.
No, not at all?
No.
So
I've got a house in Cape Town now, so I am not too far, and I'm planning on going to Botswana this Christmas. So.
First time?
First time since I was a baby, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow, that's... Yeah. I would love to speak to you after that trip.
What do you think is going to happen?
Because I feel like it's when you go back to the place of origin, regardless of where that is, regardless of the life that you've led beyond it, I think there's something powerful about...
Like a scene from The Lion King when they've got like Mufasa's got the like...
Mufasa. No, I think it's just... I think it's the people that knew your parents and knew their legacy before you even, and you connecting with those roots. I'm very much a roots person, so it's finding a different part of yourself that you might not have possibly found if you haven't been there.
I think that Nigeria is going to do that to me.
Yeah?
Because I'm half Nigerian.
Okay.
So my DNA is 50% Nigerian. I was born in Botswana, but my DNA is Nigerian. So I think going back to Nigeria is going to be like I feel like everyone there will feel like a relative.
Yes.
Because so I'm excited to go to Nigeria as well. I think I might be going with a charity soon. So
incredible.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with those trips, and thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure conversing with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.